Hello, good morning. It's still morning. For me, it's been quite a morning. I wanted to get on here and talk about uh, talk about chemo and talk about the emotional and mental aspects that I was not really aware of. I did this video yesterday, and I was still having some aphasia, still having some. I just wasn't feeling myself, wasn't feeling sharp. And so I did a whole video, and I watched it afterwards, and I thought it was fine, so I posted it. And for some reason, late last night, I decided to sort of watch it again. And what I noticed is I think I used the word about 100 times, to the point it was obnoxious. And so I took the video down and I'm redoing it without the or without as many I should say, fillers, that kind of thing. But it sort of makes the point of, chemo affects your body. Obviously, you hear about the hair loss and the nausea and the neuropathy and the mouth sores and all that stuff. I've been really lucky. I haven't really dealt with any of that. The neuropathy and the aphasia is what gets to me. But you don't really hear about, at least your doctors don't necessarily talk about the emotional. What's Buddha doing? The emotional aspects of chemo. And that chemo brings up, well, there's two parts to it. One part is chemo brings up feelings. And the other part is chemo does actually mess with your brain. The chemo that I'm on is fluoride based, which, depending on who you talk to, depending on what research you come upon, some people feel, and some researchers and scientists feel very strongly, that fluoride is a neurotoxin. And some people call it a conspiracy, or, we have it in our water, we have it in, the foods that we eat, and our toothpaste, of course. I'm not even going to get into that. But I do think there's something to fluoride being a neurotoxin. And I know that from experience. And I'm not an expert in chemo. Really, this is my second series that I've gone through. I've been relying on what my doctors tell me. I do my own research. They give you pamphlets and that kind of stuff. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, researchers, who spent their lives studying cancer and studying chemo, and they know their stuff. Chemo brain is kind of a cute name for what feels like brain damage. And I don't really want to get into sort of opinions about this, but if something is a neurotoxin, and I suspect from what I know that fluoride is, then, if it's causing neuropathy in my fingers nearly instantly, within a half hour, an hour of getting hooked up to the chemo, I start to feel the neuropathy. I go to the bathroom, go to wash my hands, and if the water's cold, it's really painful. So that's proof to me. It's messing with my nerves. I have a background in healthcare, especially anatomy and physiology. And I do know 100% that if you're messing with your nerves, you're also messing with your brain. And that really, really affected me this time. And I was reminded of the aphasia, the difficulty swallowing. If you swallow something that's too cold, it almost sort of stuns the nerves in your throat, and it can make it uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is not quite the right word. You really have to focus to swallow properly. And, we take swallowing for granted. We just do it. We don't even think about it. But when that mechanism in your throat is compromised, then swallowing becomes very scary. Especially when you're swallowing pills and having to, feeding yourself and drinking and really having to make sure that you don't ingest anything that's cold. And you can't touch anything that's cold. Even reaching into the refrigerator to grab something out can be painful. And it's just something that we take for granted, and it's something that you forget about. And there's sort of a payoff. I don't know if that's quite the right word. But the damage, the sort of collateral damage that happens from chemo sort of gets mixed into, or gets, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of gets handed off as, well, that's just the price you pay for having cancer treatment. It's like we're so fearful of cancer that we'll endure any treatment in order to get rid of it. And I've talked about this in the past videos. Is it when you're weighing the benefits, the pros and the cons? There are many people out there who choose to not do chemo. I chose to do chemo. I also chose to do other healing modalities alongside it, with the hopes that I wouldn't have to do that much chemo. But I'm not relying wholly on chemo. And if you watch any of my videos, you know how I feel about it. I feel scared of it and also grateful for it. And that's a very, very interesting place to be. And it does sort of mess with your emotions a bit. The chemo round that I had this last time was a breeze compared to what I had done a couple months ago. So I was grateful for that. What I didn't expect to come up was the emotional aspect of going through chemo. So when I did it last time, pain was my main concern. Pain and fear. Like I wanted to do the chemo because I was afraid of what was happening in my body. And the chemo was working. I was responding well to it. I was also on quite a bit of medication. Actually, I wouldn't say quite a bit. I was on medication, not nearly what many people take. Mine was very minimal, and I was very purposeful to keep my pain medication purposeful, but it did sort of dull my emotions, and so I didn't feel the emotional side of the chemo, the mental side, the psychological side, how it affects your brain. I had so much medication on board that I couldn't tell what was affecting me, whether it was the chemo or whether it was the medication. So I have much more clarity now, and I'm not in this sort of chemo pain med haze. which is how I got through what I got through before. And no judgment, how you do it, if you choose pain meds or not, if you choose chemo or not, how you choose to go about this it's a very personal journey. And if you've been diagnosed for any amount of time, you know that this becomes journey is just such a cliche word, but it really becomes this thing in your life that turns it upside down. So anyways, got through chemo, total breeze. They unplugged me on Friday, and Saturday my body felt fine, but I did not feel fine emotionally or mentally. I just didn't feel like myself, and that was actually the scariest thing. We think of ourselves as being physical beings, but we don't realize maybe sometimes that when who we think of ourselves in an emotional way, sort of how we emotionally interact with the world, when that gets compromised, or how we mentally interact with the world, and when that gets compromised, when you feel like your brain cells are just not connecting, and when you can't form a full sentence, that's the scariest thing for me. That when I'm in chemo, I can deal with the nausea, I can deal with the discomfort, the pre-meds, all of it. When I'm on chemo, I'm just loaded with chemicals, and I accept that, and I deal with it best I can. I kind of expected that because this chemo wasn't as bad as the ones before, not even close. This was like a 2 on a scale from 1 to 10, where before it was like an 8, 9, and 10, sometimes 11. So 2, 3, 4 at the most, if I'm being honest. Scraping stuff outside. So I thought I was going to breeze through it. So I actually thought, hey, I can actually go back to work. I had taken 6 days off for chemo, 3 days, and then 3 days to recover if I needed him. And I did need him, not for the physical symptoms, but for the emotional effect that it had on me. And it brought up all kinds of feelings, and anxiety was through the roof, and I dealt with it best I could. There are days when it's okay to stay in bed all day, and you have to be gentle on yourself. And that's one of the things that I had to shake off, is I thought this was my expectation. I was going to go through chemo, wasn't going to be as bad. I'll take the time off, but I'm not going to need it. I'll come back to work, I'll feel fine. And when that didn't happen, when I woke up on Saturday and I just didn't feel myself, I almost couldn't find myself. I do this thing in the morning where I set an intention for the day, and I don't get out of bed before I do that intention, before I sort of connect with myself and how do I want my day to go, and how do I want to feel today, and what's my outlook. So I sort of pre-pave my day, and I could not do that on Saturday. And I had a doctor's appointment this morning with my psychologist or psychiatrist. And, he validated that chemo does. Not only are you going through chemo, which is very intense, you're going through chemo, you're going through cancer, as strong as you are, you still have moments where you're maybe afraid that it's not going to work, or you're afraid that you're going to be left with collateral damage that won't go away. But it was also validating that it does also mess with how your brain fires and wires and connects, and you're dealing with something that's really difficult, and then something is being put in your body that diminishes your capacity to deal with that difficult thing. And that's scary. It's really, really scary. Today's been a morning. I woke up completely. I felt a little bit better, but the anxiety was there. I went into the doctor's office, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm literally doing vagus nerve activation exercises on me because I'm about to start crying in the reception area, and I don't want to do that. So thank God for phones. You can distract yourself, but there's some exercises you can do to stimulate your vagus nerve into like a relax mode. I can just feel my nervous system was just on high alert, and I walked into the doctor's office, and I don't even think I looked at him. I just put my head in my hands, and I said, I'm on the verge of a panic attack. That's where I'm at. And we immediately went into breathing exercises and being present, and it was incredibly difficult. The feelings that I've been having over this weekend have been so intense that my meditations meditation has been a struggle. And I'm doing the Joe Dispenza, activating your pineal gland, tuning into new potentials, doing those. They're intensive meditations. They're 45 minutes to an hour and a half. And just trying to take this opportunity while I'm vulnerable to make some changes, and then also to regain my sense of self. And that didn't happen. I feel like I don't even know. It just feels messy. It feels messy emotionally. And I didn't expect that. One of the things that I've always kept in the back of my mind is that as my body is healing, that my emotions must heal as well, and vice versa. As I'm healing my emotions, that my body will heal as well. And it's really, really, really uncomfortable. And I'm having a sense of relief now because I was able to go in and talk to him and be able to say what I needed to say. I was able to admit that I was terrified, that I felt vulnerable, that I was scared that the chemo wasn't going to work, even though I know better. Also feelings of not wanting to leave the house, of feeling overwhelmed by the idea of going back to work. I go back to work tomorrow. And the other side of that is feeling grateful to be here. Feeling compassion for myself for what I'm going through. And there's still a part of me that's really hard on myself. That tells me that buck up, get back to normal. You should not let this affect you. You're stronger than this. You know better. If you don't do it, no one will. If you don't support and show up for yourself, no one's going to. And feeling incredibly alone. And feeling impatient with my body. All of these feelings. And the conclusion that we came to, the conclusion that I came to, was to work on just letting the outcome go. So this entire time, for the last 6 months, I've had a really, really, even longer than that, I've had a very, very strong intention for what my outcome is. Like, this is the way I want it to happen. This is when I want to heal. This is when I'm going to get back to my life. This is how the process is going to look. I'm going to be the exception. I'm not doing chemo for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. That's not going to be me. And while that all sounds really empowering, it's also underlying this control of how I want things to go. There's an underlying pushing against, fighting against the chemo, fighting against my body, pushing against work, pushing against just trying to hold things together. And that if I don't, that things will fall apart and that I won't survive that. So now I'm at the point where I have to let go. And I don't know if y'all have done that before. I have. There's been times in my life where I've just been so stuck between a rock and a hard place that I had to surrender. And I'm at that place again. I have to surrender. And I'm not a surrendering person. Surrendering doesn't feel safe. If you've gone through PTSD, or if you've been, on the victim end of any situation in your life, to surrender is to be diminished, to be broken, to be powerless. So now it becomes a spiritual question. So now I have to trust in spirit. I have to trust in guidance. I have to trust in something bigger than myself. I have to trust in this process, and I have to honor this process instead of fighting against it. And I can smile about it now, but I was tortured about it all weekend. I gotta let go. I gotta let go. Let myself be healed. Let myself be loved. Let the chemo do what it does. And just have faith that everything will work out beautifully. And in my heart of hearts, I know that that's what's going to happen. Every time in my life that I've ever been forced to surrender. It's always turned out wonderfully. So it's kind of like just getting out of your own way. Cancer changes you. It just changes you. If you'll let it, it will change you. It will transform you. It will deliver you into a new place. And that place is scary. And you gotta let go. You gotta let go of the sides. Sometimes I imagine myself clinging to sort of the side of a riverbank, and then I purposely, in my mind, will watch myself letting my hands go and letting the water take me, and trusting that I won't drown, trusting that I'll stay afloat, and trusting that I will be taken to a new place, a place that I've never been. Right now and over this past weekend, I'm really, really, really clinging to how I want things to go. And when you do that, you sort of take the magic out of your life. You take the possibilities out of your life. You are so sort of focused on what's known that you don't let the unknown into your life and into your heart and into your reality. And this is when I talk about the gift of cancer, and when I talk about letting cancer heal you, this is what I'm talking about. Being in a position of surrender and letting go and faith and trusting in your body, trusting in yourself, trusting that not only are you strong enough, but trusting in the support that you have around you, whether that's physical or whether that's non-physical, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, doesn't matter. But you cannot get through this without changing yourself, which is so much fun. Really. I asked for it, though. I really, really asked for it. And I don't mean that in like a punishment kind of way. I mean, I literally asked for this. I asked to be healed of the condition that I was dealing with, over the last couple of years. I knew there was something wrong with my body, and I asked to be healed of it. Prayed. And like I said, it's not religious, and I have no judgment for or against it, but for me, I'm a very spiritual person. But I'm not religious in any way. This is the gift of cancer, is that it will change you. And it will change you in a beautiful, uncomfortable way if you let it. If you're going through something like this in the moment, please share. We all need to hear our different voices. When I first started diving into the world of cancer, how people feel about it and what they say about it, and the anecdotes and what the researchers say and what spiritual gurus say, and I listened to all of it, and I had to come to my own conclusions about it. And I think that is also the gift of it, is that you choose your path of healing. Or it's The healing is there if you choose it, if you allow it. Sometimes you allow it, sometimes you don't. This weekend, I wasn't allowing it. Today, I feel much better with the help of talking to a psychiatrist, psychologist. And, I've talked about that before, that feelings do come up. And, even though that cancer and chemo are physical, affect your physicality, it just knocks your heart open. It exposes all of your fears. It forces you to choose life or to not choose life. And it gives you an opportunity to be authentic. So I think that's all I'm going to share at 30 minutes. I should have warned you right off the bat that today was probably going to be a rambler. But hey, I'm smiling, and I'm looking forward to going to work tomorrow. And I'm starting to feel like myself again. So if you're going through chemo, give yourself a break if you can. Get your family to give you a break. Just pull out all the resources you have and let people help you. All right, I think that's it. That's all I got for now.